The invisible treasure. Imagine someone offered you a deal. Tomorrow morning, you could have everything you've ever wanted. More money, a better home, the perfect career, more success, whatever you've been wishing for. But there would be one condition. You would have to give up everything you already have. Your health, your family, your closest friends, your memories, your home, your ability to see, hear, walk, breathe. Even the ordinary morning you're going to wake up to tomorrow. Would you take the deal? Of course not. And yet, there's something strange about the way we live. We spend so much of our time thinking about what we don't have that we barely notice what we already do. We want more money, a better job, a better relationship, a better life. And somewhere along the way, the things we once desperately wanted become ordinary. The phone we couldn't wait to buy becomes just a phone. The home we dreamed about becomes just our home. The person we once couldn't imagine living without becomes someone we sometimes take for granted. And then we start looking for the next thing. But what if the problem isn't always that we don't have enough? What if we've simply stopped seeing the value of what we already have? This is where Rhonda Byrne's themagic begins. And its central idea is remarkably simple: gratitude. Not gratitude as a polite thank you, but gratitude as a daily practice, something you deliberately train yourself to notice. And Byrne makes a bold promise. What if changing what you appreciate could change the way you experience your entire life? To explore that idea, she doesn't give you another list of things to believe. She gives you an experiment. 28 days. 28 days of deliberately practicing gratitude. And that's where the real journey begins. The problem we don't notice. Think about the last time you got something you really wanted. Maybe it was a new phone. Maybe it was a new car, a new job, a raise, a relationship. For a while, it felt special. You noticed it. You thought about it. You were excited about it. And then something happened. You got used to it. The new phone became your phone. The new job became your job. The raise became your new normal. And once something becomes normal, we stop seeing it the way we did when we first received it. This happens constantly. We adapt, and then our attention moves to the next thing we're missing. It's almost like a treadmill. Want, then get, enjoy, then adapt. Want something else, and the cycle begins again. The strange part is that our circumstances can improve, while our sense of satisfaction barely changes. We can have more than we had 5 years ago and still feel like we're missing something. Why? Because having something and noticing its value are two completely different things. You can have a loving family and still spend your day thinking about work. You can have good health and barely think about it. You can have food in the refrigerator, clean water, electricity, a safe place to sleep, and consider all of it completely ordinary. Until one of those things disappears. Then suddenly, you realize how valuable it was. And this is one of the most interesting ideas behind the magic. We don't always suffer because we have too little. Sometimes we suffer because we have become blind to what we already have. Gratitude, in Byrne's approach, is a way of reversing that blindness. Instead of automatically asking, "What am I missing?" you begin asking, "What is already here that I've stopped noticing?" And that question changes the direction of your attention. Because your life doesn't consist only of the things you're waiting to receive. It also consists of everything you've already received and forgotten to appreciate. But Byrne doesn't want you to simply understand this idea. She wants you to test it. For the next 28 days, she gives you a different way to practice it. The strange idea behind the magic. But before we begin the 28 days, there's an important question. Why gratitude? Why should simply saying thank you have anything to do with changing your life? At first, gratitude can sound almost too simple. If you're struggling with money, being grateful doesn't magically put money in your bank account. If you're unhappy with your job, saying thank you doesn't automatically give you a new one. And if something painful has happened, telling yourself to just be grateful can feel almost meaningless. So what exactly is the magic claiming? Rhonda Byrne presents gratitude as something much more powerful than a polite response. She describes it as a kind of force, a way of directing your attention toward the good that already exists in your life. And according to her philosophy, what you consistently focus on becomes more prominent in your experience. Think about buying a particular car. Before you decide you want it, you might barely notice that model on the road. But once you start thinking about it, suddenly it seems to be everywhere. The cars were already there. What changed? Your attention. Gratitude works in a similar way. When you deliberately look for things to appreciate, you begin training yourself to notice them. A conversation you would normally ignore. A meal you would normally eat without thinking. Someone who quietly helps you. A small opportunity. A moment of peace. None of these things necessarily appeared because you became grateful. You simply became more aware of them. And this is where the book's idea becomes interesting. Byrne takes this principle much further. She believes gratitude doesn't just change what you notice. She connects it to receiving more of what you want, to what she describes as a kind of universal law. You don't have to accept every part of that idea literally to understand the practical experiment underneath it, because there is a question worth testing. What happens to your experience of life when you spend an entire month deliberately looking for reasons to be grateful? That's what the next 28 days are about. Not just thinking about gratitude, practicing it. And each day gives you a different way to do that. The 28-day experiment. Instead of telling you to simply become a more grateful person, the magic gives you a challenge. 28 days. One day at a time. Each day introduces a different gratitude practice designed to make you look at a different part of your life. Your health, your relationships, your money, your work, your goals, your problems, even the things you normally complain about. And there's an important reason for this structure. Because knowing that gratitude is good and actually practicing gratitude are two very different things. You can watch 100 videos about gratitude. You can agree with every word. You can even tell yourself, I should be more grateful. But the moment you wake up tomorrow, it's very easy to return to the same habits, the same worries, the same complaints, the same feeling that something is missing. So Byrne turns gratitude into a daily exercise. You don't have to transform your entire life overnight. You simply have to do one practice today, then another tomorrow, and another the day after that. It's almost like training a muscle. The first day, you may have to consciously search for things to appreciate. But the more you practice looking, the more you begin to notice. And that's the experiment. For 28 days, you're going to interrupt the automatic habit of asking, what's wrong? And deliberately practice asking, what's right? Some of the exercises are incredibly simple. One involves making a list of things you're grateful for. Another uses an ordinary object as a reminder. Others focus on money, relationships, health, and even difficult situations. And eventually, the practice moves beyond appreciating what you already have, toward imagining and appreciating what you want in the future. So this isn't really a journey through 28 random exercises. It's a progression. First, you learn to notice. Then you learn to appreciate. Then you learn to express that appreciation. And finally, you begin trying to make gratitude part of the way you see your entire life. So let's start with the simplest question of all. How much good is already hiding in your life that you don't even notice anymore? Week 1. Discovering what you already have. The first practice in the magic is almost ridiculously simple. At the beginning of your day, you're asked to think of 10 things you're grateful for. 10. Not 1, not 2, 10. And beside each one, you don't simply write the thing down. You write why you're grateful for it. Because there's a difference between saying, my family, and stopping for a moment to think, I'm grateful for my family because there are people in my life who care about me, support me, and give me a sense of belonging. The second one makes you actually feel the gratitude. And that's the important part. You're not trying to create an impressive list. You're training yourself to notice. At first, the obvious things come easily. Your family, your home, your health, your friends, your work. But then you reach number 7, number 8, number 9, and suddenly you have to look more carefully. Maybe it's the water you drank this morning, the ability to walk outside, a conversation you had yesterday, a skill someone taught you, a meal you didn't have to worry about finding. Things that were always there, but were almost invisible because they were normal. And this is where the exercise begins to reveal something. Gratitude isn't necessarily about finding more good things. Sometimes it's about realizing how many good things you've been overlooking. Then Byrne introduces one of the book's most memorable objects, the magic rock. It's simply a small rock, nothing extraordinary about it, but you keep it somewhere you will see it, and at the end of the day, you hold it in your hand and think about the best thing that happened that day. It could be something huge, or it could be something incredibly ordinary, a good conversation, a moment of laughter, a problem that worked out, a beautiful sunset, anything. The rock itself isn't the point, it's the reminder. Because most days, good moments happen and disappear from our attention almost immediately. The magic rock gives you a physical signal. Stop, remember, appreciate. And suddenly, an ordinary object becomes a trigger for gratitude. But there's something deeper happening here. The more you deliberately search your day for something worth appreciating, the more your mind has a reason to look for it. And that changes the question you're asking throughout the day. Instead of unconsciously scanning your life for problems, you begin scanning it for things worth noticing. The circumstances may not have changed, but your attention has. And that's only the beginning. Because after learning to appreciate the obvious blessings in your life, the book asks you to look at something much more difficult. The things you've become so accustomed to having that you barely notice them anymore. Week 2. The things we take for granted. Think about something you use every single day. Your eyes, your hands, your legs, your ability to breathe, clean water, electricity, a bed, food, the people who are always there. When was the last time you actually stopped to appreciate them? Probably not recently. And that's precisely the problem. The things we depend on most often become the things we notice the least. You don't wake up every morning amazed that your lungs are working. You don't celebrate being able to walk to another room. You don't usually think, how incredible that I can simply pick up this glass of water. You just do it. Until one day, something changes. Suddenly, the ability you never thought about becomes the thing you would give anything to have back. And this is why gratitude for health becomes such an important part of the book. The exercise isn't about pretending that everything is perfect. It's about recognizing the parts of your body and your health that are functioning right now. Your eyes allow you to see. Your ears allow you to hear. Your hands allow you to touch and create. Your legs allow you to move. Your heart keeps beating without you having to remember to tell it to. For most of us, these things are so ordinary that they become invisible, until we deliberately pay attention. And the same principle applies far beyond health. Think about the last meal you ate. How much of it did you actually notice? The taste, the smell, the effort that went into preparing it, the people who made it possible. Or did you simply eat it while looking at your phone and move on? Think about your home. There was probably a time when having that kind of shelter would have felt like a huge blessing. But after living there for years, it's just home. This is one of the strange effects of familiarity. The longer something is with us, the easier it becomes to stop seeing its value. And that's why the book keeps bringing you back to ordinary things. Not because they're extraordinary, but because they're so easy to overlook. Then there's another powerful part of the practice: gratitude for people. Think about someone who has helped you in ways you rarely acknowledge. A parent, a friend, a teacher, a colleague. Someone who once gave you advice when you needed it. Someone who stayed when things were difficult. Someone who simply made your life a little easier. We often remember dramatic moments, but relationships are usually built from hundreds of small acts that disappear into everyday life. A message, a meal, a ride, a conversation, a simple, "Are you okay?" And when those things happen repeatedly, we stop seeing them as gifts. They become expectations. The book asks you to reverse that, to look at the familiar and see it again. Because perhaps one of the biggest obstacles to gratitude isn't having nothing to appreciate. It's having so much that we've stopped noticing it. And once you start noticing what you already have, the book takes you into one of the areas where people most often feel they don't have enough: money. Money and work. Appreciating what money already does. Money is one of the easiest things to complain about. We look at our salary, our bills, our expenses, and the things we still can't afford, and our attention naturally goes toward what is missing. But the magic asks you to look at money from a completely different direction. Instead of only thinking about the money you want, think about everything the money you already have has allowed you to experience. The food you've eaten, the clothes you're wearing, the electricity that powers your home, the transportation that gets you where you need to go, the education you've received, the phone in your hand, the internet you're using right now. Even small amounts of money have moved through your life and provided you with things that would otherwise be difficult or impossible to have. Yet because we see money leaving our hands every day, it's easy to focus on the loss rather than what we received in return. You pay a bill and think, "There goes my money." But the same payment may have given you electricity for an entire month. You buy groceries and see the amount on the receipt, but forget that the money became meals for you and your family. You pay for transportation and focus on the cost, while overlooking the fact that it carried you to work, to school, to someone you love, or somewhere you needed to be. Byrne's approach is to deliberately appreciate the money that has already passed through your life. She even encourages people to look back at previous financial support and recognize what it made possible. And there's an important psychological shift hidden inside this practice. If your mind is constantly saying, "I don't have enough," then every expense becomes another reminder of scarcity. But when you deliberately notice what your money has provided, the same transactions can be seen from another perspective. This doesn't mean pretending you have unlimited money. It doesn't mean ignoring financial problems or convincing yourself that you don't need to improve your situation. It simply means separating two ideas that we often confuse: wanting more money and being grateful for the money we already have. You can want to earn more and still appreciate what your current income provides. You can have financial goals and still recognize the things your money has already made possible. And the same principle applies to work. It's easy to focus entirely on what you dislike about your job: the long hours, the difficult boss, the stress, the salary you wish were higher. But what if, for a moment, you looked at what the job does provide? It may give you income, experience, skills, connections, stability, or an opportunity to move towards something better. Again, gratitude doesn't mean you have to stay where you are. It means you don't have to become blind to the value of where you are while you're working toward where you want to be. And that may be one of the most practical ideas in the book. You don't have to choose between ambition and gratitude. You can say, "I want more," without saying, "What I have is worthless." Because once you start looking at money this way, another question naturally appears. What about the people who have been giving you things that money can't buy? Relationships. The people we forget to appreciate. Think about the person you talk to most. Now imagine that tomorrow you couldn't speak to them anymore. No messages, no phone calls, no ordinary conversations, no arguments, no jokes, no simple, "How was your day?" Just silence. would you suddenly realize how valuable all those ordinary moments were? That's the strange thing about relationships. The people closest to us can become the people we notice the least. At the beginning of a relationship, every message feels important. Every conversation feels special. You notice the little things. But as someone becomes a permanent part of your life, familiarity takes over. Their presence becomes normal. And sometimes, without realizing it, we stop appreciating the very people whose presence makes our lives richer. The magic asks you to reverse that habit. Think about someone you love and deliberately remember everything you appreciate about them. Maybe they make you laugh. Maybe they listen when you're having a difficult day. Maybe they supported you at a time when you needed someone. Maybe they taught you something. Maybe they simply show up again and again in ways you've stopped noticing because they become part of everyday life. And instead of keeping those thoughts inside your head, Byrne encourages you to express your gratitude. Tell the person. Write it down. Let them know. Because there is a major difference between feeling grateful for someone and actually communicating that gratitude. Imagine how different a relationship can feel when instead of constantly noticing what the other person does wrong, you deliberately start noticing what they do right. This doesn't mean ignoring real problems. It doesn't mean pretending every relationship is perfect. It means refusing to let imperfections become the only things you see. Think about how easily one negative moment can erase 10 positive ones in our minds. Someone can help us all week and then say one thing that annoys us, and suddenly, that's what we remember. Gratitude interrupts that pattern. It asks you to look at the whole relationship instead of allowing one unpleasant moment to define it. And perhaps the most powerful part is that gratitude can change not only the way you see another person, but also the way you behave toward them. When you genuinely appreciate someone, you're more likely to listen to them, speak kindly to them, notice their efforts, and give something back. Appreciation begins inside you, but it doesn't have to stay there. It can become a message, a gesture, a conversation, a simple act of kindness. And suddenly, something that seemed almost too simple to matter begins to have a visible effect. You appreciate someone. They feel appreciated. They respond differently, and the relationship changes. But this is where the magic becomes more difficult. It's easy to feel grateful for someone who treats you well. It's much harder to practice gratitude when life isn't giving you what you want. What happens when the person disappoints you? What happens when you lose money? When you fail? When something goes completely wrong? That's where the book's idea of gratitude is really put to the test. When life goes wrong, can you be grateful for difficulty? Gratitude is easy when life is going your way. It's easy to say thank you when you get the job, when someone helps you, when you receive good news, when something you've been hoping for finally happens. But what about the days when none of that happens? What about the rejection, the unexpected bill, the argument, the failure, the disappointment? This is where the idea of gratitude becomes much more challenging. The magic encourages you to look for something to be grateful for, even in difficult circumstances. And at first, that can sound almost unreasonable. If something genuinely hurts, why should you be grateful for it? The answer isn't necessarily that the painful thing itself is good. It's that even a difficult experience can contain something you can learn from, something it can reveal, or something it can eventually lead you toward. A failure can show you what needs to change. A rejection can force you to consider another path. A mistake can teach you something you wouldn't have learned from success. A difficult person can reveal your own patterns and weaknesses. And a painful experience can sometimes make you appreciate things you previously took for granted. The point isn't to deny the difficulty. Gratitude isn't supposed to mean pretending that something bad is good. It's about asking a different question. Instead of only asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you can also ask, "What can I learn from this? What can I appreciate despite this? Is there anything this experience has given me?" That's a very different way of responding to life. Imagine losing an opportunity you desperately wanted. Your first reaction might be disappointment, and that's natural. But after the emotion settles, Perhaps you realize that the experience taught you something, introduced you to someone, exposed a weakness, or pushed you toward an opportunity you would never have considered otherwise. You don't have to be grateful for the disappointment itself. You can be grateful for what you discovered through it. And this idea matters because life will never follow a perfectly comfortable script. There will always be things you cannot control. If your happiness depends entirely on circumstances going exactly the way you want, then every unexpected event has the power to take your peace away. Gratitude offers another possibility. Perhaps you can choose at least part of your response, even when you can't choose the situation. That doesn't mean every problem has a hidden gift waiting to be discovered. Sometimes, a painful experience is simply painful. But looking for something to appreciate can prevent the difficulty from becoming the only thing you can see. And once you learn to look for gratitude in what has already happened, the magic takes the idea one step further. It asks you to use gratitude not only for the life you already have, but also for the life you want to create. And this is where gratitude meets one of the book's most interesting ideas, visualization. Gratitude for what you want, desire, and visualization. So far, gratitude has been about looking backward, looking at what you've received, the people you've met, the opportunities you've had, and the things that are already part of your life. But then, the magic introduces a more unusual idea. What if you could also be grateful for something before you have it? Imagine you have a goal you've been thinking about for years. Maybe it's a new home, a better career, financial freedom, a relationship, or something else that feels just out of reach. Most of the time, when we think about something we want, our attention immediately goes to the gap between where we are and where we want to be. I don't have it yet. I'm not successful enough. I don't have enough money. It's taking too long. Byrne suggests reversing that mental pattern. Instead of constantly focusing on the absence of what you want, imagine already having it and allow yourself to feel grateful for that imagined outcome. Picture the moment when it happens. See the details. Imagine how you would feel, and then experience the gratitude as though the thing you're hoping for has already arrived. This is closely connected to the book's broader emphasis on visualization. The idea is that a mental image can make a desired outcome feel more real and emotionally familiar. If you constantly picture failure, rejection, and everything that could go wrong, those images can influence the way you approach the real situation. But if you repeatedly picture yourself succeeding, you may begin to approach the goal with a different emotional state and a different sense of possibility. Of course, this is where it's important to separate visualization from magical thinking. Imagining a new job doesn't send an application for you. Imagining financial success doesn't replace learning skills, working, saving, or making good decisions. Visualization is not a substitute for action, but it can influence the mindset you bring to action. Think about an athlete before a competition. They don't simply hope something will happen. They mentally rehearse movements, situations, and outcomes. The mind becomes familiar with the performance before the body performs it. The magic takes a similar idea and places gratitude at the center of it. Instead of saying, "I hope this happens," you mentally step into the experience and say, in effect, "I'm grateful that this is possible." Whether you interpret Byrne's explanation spiritually or psychologically, the exercise raises an interesting question. What kind of future are you repeatedly rehearsing in your mind? Because your imagination is always showing you something. The question is whether you're deliberately choosing the picture or simply allowing fear to choose it for you. And there's another important shift here. When you become grateful for the possibility of your future, you stop treating your goal as something that will finally make you worthy or happy. Your goal becomes something you're moving toward while still appreciating the present. You're no longer saying, "I can only be grateful when I get there." You're saying, "I'm grateful for where I am, and I'm excited about where I'm going." And after spending weeks practicing gratitude for the past, the present, and the future, the final part of the journey asks an even bigger question. What happens when gratitude stops being an exercise and becomes a way of seeing life? The final days, turning gratitude into a habit. By the final part of the 28 days, something important has changed about the way the practice feels. In the beginning, gratitude required deliberate effort. You had to sit down and think of 10 things. You had to remember the magic rock. You had to stop and consciously appreciate your health, your money, your relationships, and the ordinary things around you. But repetition changes behavior. What once required a reminder can eventually become something you do naturally. You start noticing things without being told to look for them. You're walking outside and suddenly notice the weather. You're eating and actually taste the food. Someone helps you, and instead of taking it for granted, you recognize the effort. You receive a message from someone you love and pause for a moment before moving on. The world hasn't necessarily changed. The same house is there. The same job may be there. The same people are there. The same problems may even be waiting for you. But your relationship with those things can be different. And that's really what makes the 28-day structure interesting. It isn't asking you to manufacture a completely new life in 4 weeks. It's asking you to repeatedly practice a new way of paying attention. Think about how habits work. The first time you do something, it requires concentration. After repeating it enough times, it becomes automatic. Gratitude can work in a similar way. You begin by deliberately searching for reasons to appreciate your life, and eventually, you become more likely to notice those reasons without consciously searching. And perhaps that's why the book doesn't end with a single grand secret. The secret is repetition. One day, then another, then another. You keep returning your attention to what is good, what is valuable, what is meaningful, and what is already present. This doesn't mean you stop having problems. It doesn't mean you stop wanting more. It doesn't mean you become satisfied with every part of your life and never try to improve anything. You can still have ambition. You can still chase goals. You can still want a better future. The difference is that you're no longer postponing appreciation until that future arrives. You can work toward a better life without treating your current life as worthless. And maybe that's the real transformation the magic is trying to create. Not a person who walks around pretending everything is perfect, but a person who has become much harder to make blind to the good things that are already there. Because once you learn to see those things, you begin to realize something uncomfortable. Many of the things you are desperately trying to get may not be the only things capable of making your life meaningful. Some of what you've been searching for may already be sitting quietly inside the life you're living right now. And that brings us to the deeper message behind the entire book. What the magic is really saying. After 28 days, it's tempting to think the lesson of the magic is simply be grateful and good things will happen. And that is certainly part of Rhonda Byrne's message. But underneath the book's more mystical claims is a much simpler idea that doesn't require you to believe in any particular theory about the universe. We often tell ourselves that we'll finally be happy when something changes, when we make more money, when we get the right job, when we find the right person, when we reach a certain level of success, when our problems disappear. In other words, we keep placing happiness somewhere in the future. The magic challenges that habit. It asks you to look at the present and recognize that your life already contains things you once hoped for, prayed for, or would have considered extraordinary. The problem is that once we have them, we get used to them. They become normal, and normal things become invisible. Gratitude is a way of making the invisible visible again. It doesn't mean you stop wanting more. It doesn't mean you stop improving yourself. It doesn't mean you have to call every difficult situation a blessing. It simply means you stop making your appreciation dependent on getting everything you want. You can want a better job and still appreciate the job you have. You can want more money and still appreciate what your current income provides. You can want a different future and still recognize the value of the present. You can have problems and still notice what isn't broken. And perhaps that's the most powerful shift in the entire book. Moving from, I'll be grateful when, to, I can be grateful now. Because your circumstances don't have to become perfect before something in your perspective can change. Sometimes, the first step isn't getting more. Sometimes it's finally noticing more. And after 28 days of practicing that, the book leaves you with one final question. What would happen if you continued doing it after the challenge was over? The 28-day challenge. The final message. You don't have to believe every claim in the magic to test its central idea for yourself. Try the experiment. For the next 28 days, take a few minutes each day to deliberately notice what is already good in your life. Write down what you're grateful for. Remember the people who have helped you. Appreciate the things you normally overlook. When something goes wrong, ask whether there is anything you can learn from it. And when you think about the future, don't let everything you don't have yet make you blind to everything you already do. Because here's the strange thing about gratitude. The moment you start looking for what is valuable, you realize how much was there all along. So before you leave this video, stop for a moment and think of 3 things in your life that you would desperately want back if they suddenly disappeared tomorrow. Don't choose things because they sound impressive. Choose things that are genuinely meaningful to you. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your home. Maybe it's a simple ability you've never thought twice about. Now imagine your life without those things for just a moment. Then come back to the life you have right now. Nothing outside of you has necessarily changed, but perhaps you can see it a little differently. And maybe that's the real magic. Not getting everything you want, not turning life into a perfect story, but learning to recognize the value of what was already there before you ever thought to look for it.